Hi everybody, and welcome to panel 2 of our Women in Health Tech series for the podcast The Only Way is Ethics. Really looking forward to the panel. We've got some fantastic guests, and I'd just like to say thank you to every single one of you for taking the time out to join us on the panel. I'm sure we're going to have some interesting discussions over the next hour or so. So welcome to you all. So just going around the room, so we have Rachel Murphy, we have Catherine Corbett, we have Leah Parry, and we have Kimberly Dawson, who have joined us. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand over to each one of you to introduce yourself, just give us a bit of your background and your journey into digital. And then we're gonna kick off the discussions, and I'm sure we're gonna have lots to talk about, and maybe be a bit disruptive along the way as well. That'd be quite nice. All right, okay. I'm gonna hand over to Catherine first.
Thanks, Dean. Hi everyone. I'm Catherine Corbett. I'm a nurse by background for the last 20 years. I trained in Ireland. I've worked in various different countries, such as Dubai, Saudi Arabia, UK, and now I'm back in Ireland working in different roles in nursing leadership. I started my health informatics journey back in 2016 as part of a transformation and EPR implementation project, and then made the move from nursing leadership over to a health informatics implementation project in 2018, and soon thereafter did my training, became a CSO, and went along that journey, became the National Transformation Clinical Lead for implementation and development of the EPR, where I built and grew teams of clinicians along the way, mainly women. So having to support and mentor those who came over from clinical areas to feel, I suppose, confident and competent in the world of health informatics, and also undertook CSO mentorship as well. So quite similar pathways, and as well empowering people and trying to help them navigate in very foreign waters when moving over from clinical environments over to the world of health informatics.
Thanks, Catherine. That's great.
Hi everyone, I'm Leah Parry. I'm the CXIO for Nursing, Midwifery and AHPs at University Hospitals Bristol and Western down in the southwest. I've been working in digital health for coming up to 10 years now. I've worked in a couple of organisations where I've been the clinical lead overseeing EPR deployments, implementation of policy and kind of general digital transformation from very paper-based processes. I'm really passionate about coaching and supporting women, especially in health tech, but in general. And I'm really looking forward to having a chat. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Leah. Rachel?
Thanks, Dean. Rachel Murphy. So founder of a company called The Grafter, and I've spent probably 15 years, I reckon, in and around healthcare. So led the business transformation of the health regulator, Nursing Midwifery Council, and then led the patient-facing transformation of the NHS, so nhs.uk, NHS app, and then I've built and sold a couple of businesses in healthcare. The last one I sold in 2020, and again we were building services for the NHS. So we built NHS Jobs, the one that works, and we also built the COVID home testing, did loads of stuff in around healthcare, and currently helping entrepreneurs to grow, raise or exit, and pleased to report as many female entrepreneurs in healthcare as boys, and yeah, just love healthcare. So lots of opinions, delighted to be here.
Thanks, Rachel. And Kimberly?
Yeah, so my name's Kimberly and I am a Senior Digital Clinical Safety Officer. I've been working in the land of digital since November 2020. So I came, unfortunately, during the middle of the pandemic into digital, which had never really been on my projection of where I wanted to be job-wise, but seemed like a a good time to move during everything else that was going on at that time. And for the last nearly 2 years, I've been full-time CSO, and before that I was a CSO and a digital specialist nurse.
Thanks, Kimberly. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, some great varied backgrounds in relation to everyone's roles. And I'd like to pick up on, I think everyone, interestingly, has spoken about empowering women, coaching, supporting in relation to, obviously, their roles and within their organisations. The lay of the land at the moment and the landscape in the NHS, very difficult. The position that we're in, is that made it more difficult in relation to what you guys have said around that sort of like, coaching, empowering, supporting, and where we're at the moment in relation to sort of, we've got less people we need to recruit into the NHS, and I'd like to start the conversation off there if we can.
I know we've talked about it before, Dean, but I mean, we're all here because we're all passionate about healthcare, but particularly digital healthcare. And I truly believe that most of us that work in the sphere are absolutely convinced and behind the fact that it's the thing that's going to save healthcare if we do it right in terms of operational capacity, delivery, quality, etc. It's the one big hole, isn't it, compared to other sectors at the moment, and it's just woefully behind. So I think we are all absolutely on the boat and going in the right direction from a digital healthcare perspective. I think because of that and because of needing the best people to do the job, we've got to be as inclusive as we can to get the right people to do those jobs. And I think that's where recruiting and retaining the best people is just such a priority for the NHS at the moment, and healthcare in general. And if, through the lens of kind of the female-male divide, we know that digital healthcare in particular is particularly male-dominated. We know that the NHS is particularly female-dominated. So in terms of that change management piece, that clinical workflow piece, that understanding piece, we know that we need to represent females and women in that. And I think, there's a stat that I know you've done your homework on after our conversation the other week about jobs and person specs, and men will apply for a job when they only meet, I think it's 40 to 60% of a spec, whereas women will wait till they hit 80 to 90. And so therefore, how are we challenging ourselves to make sure that we are recruiting as inclusively as possible to get the right people? Because just because someone applies for a job doesn't mean they're the best person for it. And I think I just want to keep banging that drum about how we are as inclusive as possible, because we need the best people at the end of the day, and we don't want our recruitment processes to eliminate who could be the best people. And that's massive from a female employment and empowerment point of view.
Oh, absolutely, Leah. And it is really interesting talking about those stats in relation to, because something I obviously didn't know, and like I said before we started recording, every day's a school day. And if men looking at job applications, etc., and 40 to 60% ticks a box, they'll go for it. But however, women sort of 80, 90%. And someone mentioned on one of the other panels, is that a confidence thing in relation to as well, bringing that in? Does that mean that women aren't as confident and don't have that go for it attitude in relation to that? I don't know. It would be really interesting to get sort of like some of the other panelists' opinions in relation to the direction of travel in relation to that. Maybe Rachel.
Yeah, very happy to jump in on that. So I have to kind of out myself in the respect that I wouldn't naturally fall into those percentages. I would have had a punt if I had 10% of the information, if I'm totally frank. But that's me at 46 with a lot of experience under my belt. 20-year-old me wouldn't have been as ballsy as that. But I mean, no, it definitely wouldn't have been. So I think there's an element of us making sure that these processes are fair and equitable. But to Leah's point, it is about appointing the right people into the role. And this shouldn't ever be a box ticking. We've got to get balance. It's got to be the right people. But technology, recruitment talent, all of that has come on a hell of a long way, and yet we're still deploying, very old school tactics around how we do the recruitment, and the process to recruit is tragically slow. And if you compare that to private sector, I bet we're missing out on talent all over the place, because people think, Christ, how long is this bloody process? And so, there's a lot of areas where improvement can be made. But I think the bit that it probably stems from in relation to those stats is around imposter syndrome, which is something that I know I certainly, absolutely suffer with at times now, and have done over the years. And I think, women do operate slightly differently in that respect, and will perhaps doubt and question a little more than boys would. And we've got to set up the process to allow for that. And that's part of the challenge, isn't it? The kind of one size fits all doesn't necessarily cut it. And so, my views would be there's technology that can help with that, but there's also a raft of ways that we can be tapping in, and also, fishing in a slightly different pond. If we think about different age groups, demographics, where are people looking for, TikTok at the minute, people are, applying for roles there. I strongly suspect the NHS and advertising there at the minute. So there's opportunities to start to think about some of these things in a different way.
Obviously, imposter syndrome itself is something that is actually put onto us as we've grown up, of that actually we are deemed to be doing either something that is above what we should be doing, or actually somebody has a better idea and that idea should be listened to. Now, from a stat taken from 2020, which is obviously quite old now, given it's 5 years, but actually 62% of men hold manager positions, which then means that only 38% of women hold manager positions throughout employment history. And actually that then has an impact on how women view themselves of when it comes to jobs and the job roles that they take. But actually it's about us having more confidence in what it is that we do. I know on a day-to-day basis, I've said, I feel like an imposter in what I do, but I've been doing this for 3 years. So actually I do know what I'm on about. And I just need to kind of reach over that hurdle of, oh, actually, I can do this. I've been doing it for long enough. And I would never have second questioned myself during my nursing tasks. So therefore, I shouldn't doubt myself now.
I couldn't agree more. And this whole, like we talk about imposter syndrome. I know, Leah, we were chatting about this, I think the other day. I don't know, you've got your views, and it'd be nice to hear them, Leah, sort of like in, but do we tend to find this is more towards, you find more women talking about imposter syndrome than men?
So I think you're right. I've got quite strong views on imposter syndrome, and I think growing up, I think it goes back to what Kimberly said about growing up and societal norms. Girls are taught to be careful and be pretty and be cautious and to do things right and to do things well and to always get things right. And boys are taught to be brave and courageous and try things and break things. And so I think there is that kind of constant expectation. And there are many exceptions to the rule, but generally, it's around, actually, can I do this well? And if I can't do it, I'm not going to even try, for fear of, being told I'd got it wrong or any kind of other implication. And so I'm a rugby player, and there's a bit of a clip that's gone viral just recently. There's a player that's come over from America called Ilona Maher. She was big on the American version of Strictly Come Dancing, and she's done a clip just recently where someone asked her about imposter syndrome. She said, I don't get it. It's not a thing for me, because she doesn't, and this is very rare, I think, in females. We've worked hard to be in certain arenas, and we've worked hard to get the seats at the tables that we are in, because actually they're not easy to get to. So if you've earned that seat, you are absolutely worthy of being there. And I think we are often, as females, we are our biggest critics. And actually, if we viewed us through the lens of other people, we wouldn't be imposters, because actually people ask us because we do have a right to be there and a right to inform. We are knowledgeable, and we've done our time doing our learning, and that's why people are interested in our opinions. So I think we are our own worst enemies, actually, most of the time.
Yeah, no, thanks, Catherine. You know, your role in relation to and picking up on that, you know, head of transformation lead, national transformation lead, and all these sort of titles within that sort of, and within private industry. How did you find that? And was imposter syndrome something that you thought you had?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think, Kimberly, we spoke about this before we started, was I think moving over, if I talk about my own experience and mentoring and building teams, you know, within that transformation lead role, coming from, you know, nursing, physio background, for example, you have an identity by simply putting on a uniform and a badge every day, and you're recognized as that person, and you feel safe and you feel secure. You have the patient usually directly as a contact to you. It's natural. That's what we've been trained to do through procedures, processes, care pathways, and so on. But when you make that jump, and for whatever reason motivates you to do that, over to digital health as a female, definitely 1,000% you feel that imposter syndrome. You have the doubts, you have the questions. In my role currently at the moment, we're building 2 teams of clinical, non-clinical site leads, and that's one of the first things I say to them in their early days and early months. And I'm actually mentoring and coaching them and minding them for the moment, because I think it's really key that obviously organizations invest in the right people. We don't necessarily need huge amounts of money per se to do it, but we need to invest. We need the right people to do transformation projects and do it well, and keeping patients at the heart of whatever we do. But I think absolutely supporting and mentoring, we need to have clear pathways when people move over from their safe havens of a clinical role where they have an identity, especially as women, into the world where, you know, I sit in an office with, you know, mainly men, and you have those moments where you do feel silly, but you have to push yourself to ask the question, because my driver and my passion is, you know, safety, patients, you know, using technology to improve safety efficiencies for both our patients and our end users. But I think we really do need to raise awareness of the industry, of the opportunities that we can make a difference through the use of health technology to improve and do it well, and having the right people there. But it doesn't need to be a massive investment, and maybe using some good news stories of, you know, of organizations that have done it well, and looking at their models and how they've done it, but absolutely investing and supporting and mentoring and growing our people is really key, and I'm quite passionate about that.
Positive strokes. I think we're really bad at it in general, aren't we? In relation, I think in industry, in our organisations, and supporting each other within our communities. But you're right, it's celebrating the good sort of, like, you know, in relation to that. And interesting you talking about that, Catherine. I want to pick up on, and probably being a bit selfish here, sort of like me and Kimberly on the here as CSOs, but obviously Leah, you leading up the team in relation to that as well. That whole imposter syndrome really comes into play in relation to, if you look at the journey of some like CSOs, or how they're they're chosen for that role. It's a lot of them, a big percentage is you're told that's what, you know, you will be the clinical safety officer for the organisation, and you will need to do X, Y, and Z. And all of a sudden, those people are just sort of, you know, landed in that position, and like, oh, and by the way, that's not your full-time role. It's sort of like 20% of it, and you're going to do everything else as well while you're doing that. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, or Kimberly, in your situation, you know, you are, I don't know whether you still are, but, you know, the only clinical safety officer within your organisation. And very hard then when there's an expectation that you are and I said this interestingly in one of the other panels around sort of some of the CSOs on there, and this leads us quite a good segue into sort of leadership and women in leadership, is that 2 of the people on the panel didn't see themselves as leaders within their roles as CSOs. But I quickly sort of said to them, well, you know, there is an expectation that you support, you are giving advice and guidance, you are supporting, people are looking to you to give direction in relation to clinical risk management, the whole process, its application in relation to digital health systems, and needs your guidance. So where is there not leadership in relation to that? Which was nice. It was quite positive, and they took the, you know, and were saying, "Oh my God, yeah, I am a leader, aren't I?" In relation to that, and that was great. But yeah, maybe Kimberly, in relation to that, how do you find that whole sort of like
Yeah,
space?
so it is difficult as the only CSO in an organisation. And recently we've had a Freedom of Information request come in that then showed me actually how many systems I didn't know about and I wasn't actually privy to, along with the ongoing workload that there is and being kind of the funnel. So obviously there's loads of people at the top and then it comes to me and I'm the only one. So actually my workload is humongous. But it's also then the reach out of other CSOs. I've had quite a lot of conversations. One recently reached out because I'd done a podcast with Dean, and she'd listened to that and she was like, I think I want to talk and discuss what it is that I'm doing because it sounds similar to what it is that you're doing, which was really nice that she felt that she could reach out, but also to give that mentorship and guidance to quite a few CSOs over the last couple of years of this is how it is. Sometimes it can be quite lonely, but actually you need that confidence and also that voice to say no. And that's been the most difficult point of, even though I'm not a senior manager and I'm not involved in any of those meetings and I work on my own, to then branch out and be like, you cannot do this, or yes, I am happy with that, kind of then in some ways shows that, yeah, so I'm a leader external to all of the teams. So actually I have basically a pocket of knowledge in every single camp going within digital and outside of digital, which actually gives me a bigger overview as CSO than what it would do in any other job that I've ever had.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I think, you know, in those roles, you're exposed to all the different teams, all the different subject matter experts in relation to what you do, and I think people need to recognise that, and it's not recognised as enough. So we're talking about this imposter syndrome, etc., and all the sort of like issues surrounding that, from whether it's something that's ingrained since, I'm not going to say right back to birth, but sort of like, you know, from an early age, etc. So what do we do about this? What are the solutions? What should we be doing to stop this sort of like, I mean, great from you, Leah, saying about, you know, that rugby player that's come across and said like, it's not a thing for her. And that's absolutely fantastic. So that, but what should we be doing in relation to making sure this isn't sort of like something that's sort of, you know, ingrained in us and predominantly women moving forward?
Well, I think it starts a lot early in the workplace, doesn't it? So it needs to start, you know, at nursery, at home, at school, with, you know, a change in how, you know, girls and boys are treated around what we can and we can't do. I'm one of three, I'm the eldest and have two brothers, and I think in a lot of ways quite a masculine upbringing. So I was always of the belief that and was always taught we could do whatever we fancied, which of course has caused problems for school teachers and employers over the years. But I explains exactly why I'm an entrepreneur today. But I do think that it you know, we do need to level that playing field out around, you know, opportunities and self-belief in girls in a way that, you know, it seems more innate for boys. I see this with nephews and nieces of mine, where, you know, there's more second guessing with girls. That's almost instinctive, and it's like, in the case of my niece, she's the smartest bloody person I think I've ever met. She's not run the country in a few years. We're all in trouble. But there just needs to be that, a bit of a realignment, and right from the start, I think. And then we all have a duty and responsibility as female leaders to make damn sure that people who are already in the workplace and in the system get the opportunities, fair and equitable, but also that we signpost some of this stuff and we do a bit of a shout out, and encourage people to go for roles, and and push a little until it becomes more second nature, would be my view.
So some stats: 76% of the workforce within the NHS are women. Only 25% are in management positions, in leadership positions. In that, that's a bit skewed, isn't it? I think in relation to that, that's nuts, absolute nuts. One that came out that was a bit jaw-dropping for me as well, when we spoke to Liz Ashall-Payne. Apparently, only in innovation, only 1% of funding goes to women, and I was just like, excuse me. It was just sort of really sort of. So any women sort of entrepreneurs or innovators that go in front of panels for funding, 1%. I don't know where to start in relation to that sort of statistic, and is it because they're going in front of, and I'm not being sort of stuffy old men that are
boys club,
boys club, the boys IT club, or whatever you want to call it. And then the issue of, like we've said, in IT, health IT, women moving across into health IT from clinical roles, etc. You're going to be interviewed by CIOs and all these, predominantly men, in relation to that. Who's vetting the applications? Who's writing the applications? All that process ever, men, in relation to that. And people listening, shoot me down if you want to, if I'm wrong in relation to that. But I'm making assumptions and I'm probably right. That needs to change.
I wonder as well, if you think about that behaviour we talked about with the specifications and applications, actually there'll be a lot more men willing to just take a punt and just and potentially promise the world when they haven't got the solutions yet, and it's that say yes and we'll work it out afterwards.
Smoke and mirrors.
Rachel will be far more experienced in this area than I am, but I would put some money on the fact that there are a lot more go for it bids from men, whereas women will want to be able to deliver on what they're promising and have more of the I's dotted and T's crossed before they even start the journey.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The innovation funding bit, I think, is wider than just innovation. It's actually about raising money, full stop.
Okay.
It's if you are wanting to get investment into a company globally, then you're looking at 1% that currently goes to women. There's a reason I bootstrapped my last couple of businesses. I don't think I could be asked to go through the process and get turned down. Sorry, Dean, I don't know whether swearing is allowed, but we'll edit around that if needs be.
No, it's fine. No.
Right. But I do think that is inherent in the fact that it is, it's boys who have been through that process. So they are, VCs, they are managing that investment. And there's an element of them just not being as comfortable, I guess, extending the investment to women. And I see, I've come out of healthcare in a way, and I'm working in that sector now. And so therefore, I'm probably a little bit of a shock, personally, in way of what they're used to. But yeah, those stats are criminal, in way of whether it's innovation or it's funding. But that's not just UK. That's a global issue at the minute, and that there are a number of people.
Yeah, it is global.
Yeah. Trying to drive a change there, but it's incredibly slow.
Yeah, Dean, I'd like to jump in on that as well. I think it's really fascinating listening to all of the inputs so far, and I think definitely, Rachel, going back to your point around it starts very, very early. I think with girls, definitely, and things are shifting, things are changing. Like Leah, I play a lot of Gaelic football, and I can see in sport things are changing, but we're still having to fight. I've been playing for 30 odd years now, and we're still fighting week on week, but it is happening. Change is happening, but I think it takes a lot of persistence, dedication, hard work, and sometimes talking to walls. I think in whatever industry, whether it be sport, healthcare, health tech, I think women are built inherently different to men, and I think sometimes we overthink things. We want to be true to our word. I think that's been mentioned. We want to be organized, we want to be planned, we want to follow things through, and not to, in a way, bluff. Yeah, I'll promise that, and actually I just want to get in the door and maybe not deliver. I think we're all in these positions because we are persistent, we are dedicated, we're passionate. And I think things like we're doing now, and Dean, you know, I salute you for doing, you know, our podcasts and panel discussions like this, because we can celebrate women in technology and encourage others to make a leap, or, you know, reach out, Kimberly, as you were saying, and thinking of that CSO world. It's a very lonely role. But there's, even when I started, it's moved on. There's so many support networks now for that role. But I think it's having people prominent and celebrating and listening to people in those positions. You know, we all have different backgrounds, but I think it's just promotion and awareness. There are people there are people doing it, and, you know, that we can support, we can mentor each other.
I think just jumping on what you just said there, Catherine, I think that's the other thing we're bad at as women, is celebrating our successes and shouting about them. And I think, you know, talking about how fewer women go through these processes and come out with a win is something we don't do. And, you know, we're all pro coaching and mentoring, and we really need to shine a light on the people that have done well and have these successes, so they can be accessible, and so that people can reach out to them and say, you did that, tell me how you did it, I want to learn. How do we capture that learning and make it really shareable, so that the people that do have the ideas, you know, you've got to see it to believe it, to do it type thing. How do we connect those people up? But it's by doing things like this, and it's by doing podcasts, and it's by mentoring and networks. And you briefly mentioned the Shuri network earlier, Dean, but like, they have been so incredibly successful. You know, I think it was 2019, Shuri Chalk and Sarah Marnie started that up. And the power and the success. And if you look at people that have come through their programs and are now in positions of leadership, or in positions that they wouldn't have got before that network, I think the more we can just connect people with people that are doing, to learn, to champion, to shout, that for me is the big ask. I think if you're doing it and if you're winning, please share it, please shout about it. We need you.
Just jumping in on that as well, Leah. I think, I absolutely agree around Shuri, and I think it was worth giving a bit of a nod to Hassan Chowdhury, who does a lot of work raising the profile of that network. But I think the community bit is the key bit here, isn't it? It's about, and it doesn't matter what the role is, what level you're at. But it's about making sure that we are connecting, and, you know, that we're kind of, you know, I guess raising each other up, and making sure that some of the, you know, the good things that people are doing are actually being acknowledged. And I think, you know, we've got a real opportunity with community these days, with social media. I mean, for us, you know, there's a lot of negative with lots of it, but there's a huge amount of positive in being able to help, you know, help raise the awareness around these things easily for others.
Yeah, you're absolutely on point there, Rachel, because, you know, I'm going to mention now, like, initiatives and stuff. So you Shuri network, yeah, absolutely fantastic. The stuff it's done since, like you say, 2019, you know, it's just been amazing to get people sort of like in those sort of like positions of leadership. And I think I mentioned before we started recording the Evelyn Dunsmore Foundation, which has been set up for sort of like women in health tech, and I'm a supporter of that. I was at the inaugural sort of meeting in relation to that. And for people that don't know, and I'll just quickly sort of like in that are listening, and for those on the panel as well, Evelyn Dunsmore was a very inspirational woman. She was my COO at IMS Maxims, and a good friend of myself, and one of my sort of colleagues, Shane Tickell, you know, Rachel, as well. So set up the foundation, and we're going to be doing, like, sort of, you know, trying to push that forward, and and sort of, promote that in relation to the podcast. And I'd like us to work as well. The reason I set this up first and foremost was having a chat with just a few women in health tech, and they were saying, why don't you sort of, I had an idea. I said, I'm thinking about doing something sort of like women, women in health tech. I might do a couple of podcast episodes. And then all of a sudden it just went boom. And I was like, I'm going to have to do panels. I'm going to have to do sort of like a load of panels. Let's do that. And I was umming and ahhing, and it was speaking to Lisa from Safehand, and we were at a conference, and she said, no, you've got to do it, push it forward. And then I was like, yeah, let's do that. But I think it's a real good opportunity for us to sort of like, keep that momentum up, and maybe sort of like, it's all about sort of safety in numbers. But it's about, isn't it? It's doing it together as a collective. If everyone puts their heads together and we sort of like move this forward, whether it's sharing resources, whether it's giving a bit of our time, whether it's any initiatives that we can do to try and sort of like, grow this and make it sort of, a positive thing. Because you're right, Leah, we don't celebrate, do we? We don't celebrate the positive things that we've done, and we need to. A lot more. I'm not saying like we do the Only Way is Ethics award ceremony, because I think that certain people in here know what I'm about these award things. Unfortunately, though, I'm going to be a bit disruptive. They do my crusting, to be honest. But anyway, that's a different podcast, that one, in relation to that. But there we go. I know we've mentioned sort of STEM in other sort of like panels, but I'd like us to sort of like at least have a small chat about that, because Rachel, and like you said as well, it starts, doesn't it? It starts back at the like ground roots. It's not about is it like getting to people when they're sort of so far down the line. It's really important for any change to happen that we start at the ground roots. And we had Jessica Morley on one of the panels, and very inspirational. But she was talking about, so she's at Yale University, and she said to me, she said, Dean, if I walk across campus now into the science and technology sort of building, she said, I guarantee you I'll see no women in there. It will be all men sitting at the computers doing science, technology, etc., and that sort of stuff. And there's a big lean towards pushing women towards the arts, literatures, and sort of, the practical, what they call, you do the practical sort of like stuff. Being brutally honest, I was never aware, obviously, but as a man, I was never aware that was a thing, until we were having the discussions. I was like, really? And then Kay Reynolds mentioned in her school, which was a mixed school, she was the only girl doing chemistry A-level. And I was like, wow, that's like really, really odd. But obviously not. From that careers perspective, is there, I don't know if there are, what's happening out there? Are there sort of like initiatives to change that tide?
I think it starts even earlier than that. I've got a 3.5-year-old, and the other day he came home and said something, I can't remember what we're talking about, and it was, gender roles and norms are a thing, and he's 3.5. He goes out and gets dirty, and that's encouraged, and that's play in the garden, get muddy, and he's exploring. Whereas a friend of his, she's a little girl, and she if she gets mud on her, she's like, oh, I don't want to get the mud off, it's dirty. It's that kind of exploring, taking risks behaviour. It's all of that starts way before they're picking A-levels and what subjects they want to do. There's a lot of evidence around women's kind of innate wanting to care, create, and therefore, whether it's societal conditioning or innate nurture, actually that they're the kind of topics that they end up going to. And I think there are quite a few sort of incentives now in terms of STEM topics and exposing them to females, and I think it's that action, and how do we keep reinforcing that to keep breaking those norms? Because a bit like Catherine said around the sporting world, it's better than it is now, but that's only because of absolute hard work, grit and determination from a core group of people. And so how do we keep embodying that and showing people, actually, you know, I'll say it again, if you can see it, you can be it. So how do we highlight those people, and how do we make people know what's available? Because I think that's some of it as well. People just genuinely don't know. And so therefore they pick based on what they've been exposed to, what they've seen, what their parents did, what their families do. And so you don't really break out of kind of those traditions either. So I think it's something that we all have to actively work on. You know, there are lots of programs now, aren't there, that are around anti-racism and pro-equity, and it's almost that anti-sexism. How do we make things as available to all genders and all people, so that goes back to what we said at the beginning, we are exposing people to then ultimately get the right people and the best people doing the right things.
Bringing that on to sort of like, I think you mentioned, Leah, about sort of like processes and policy and trying to change from that perspective. But I think that type of thing's sort of a lot harder to do. I think we know firsthand, Leah, in relation to sort of like, you know, trying to get sort of, you know, any, you know, policy forward and pushing it forward, because there's potentially sort of like, you know, a lack of awareness, a lack of understanding within those communities. And I think in relation to women in health tech, would it be fair to say that, you know, the processes and the policies are probably, if you're looking to get those changed, or you're sort of like, you know, pushing that forward, it will be to a predominantly male workforce. So I don't know, what are people's views in relation to this?
I guess well, there's an age demographic thing, isn't there? Firstly, so I started my career many years ago in IT, and I was the only woman in a 300-person IT team, aged 18. And over the years, I've seen that, and actually, it was a good laugh. But for me, I'd rather have a mix. I'd rather have men and women. Like all of one thing is just too much. And so over the years, I've seen that balance out a lot. But equally, we were coming from a very low place. And so therefore, you know, that journey, and I think the advent of roles like user research, design, service design, has, I don't know whether it's made it more palatable for women, or that the naturally more creative potentially has meant that you've got a bit better balance. But if I think about my last business, we had probably 100 staff when I sold the business, and developers would have been 80-90% boys, and that was not through lack of trying, but it was, I think, just in way of the sheer volume of men in that market versus women, and we tried and pushed that hard. But I think that there is, I think there is opportunity always to try and balance some of that out. But I think that it does go back to the right person for the right role. And I guess digital teams that I've seen, if I think about NHS Digital, when I was working there, probably had 500-600, in where a team would have been almost 50-50 across all of the disciplines. Okay. But we also seconded clinicians in because we wanted to actually, build the right things rather than have technical people just building what they fancied. And so, there was a balance, but I think that there's still a long way to go if you look across the entire system. I'm talking about a subset around digital, I think there's opportunity that we can take to move some of that forward. But I guess if I look back over the last 25, it's nearly 30 years. Christ, that's depressing. Then things have moved along. but it's not equitable, and that's the point. You know, we're not at the point at the minute where, you know, we've got opportunity in the same way as men, not just in healthcare. I think, you know, wider than that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting. I think, Leah, going back to your point around, you know, the play thing and what is actually normal, acceptable. It's complex, isn't it? There's a lot of factors here, and it starts from early ages right the way through. And I totally agree. I think it's around awareness as well of what the role is right there and where that could, you know, if you're thinking you're in secondary school or doing your GCSEs, is actually, if I pick these subjects, what can that lead to? I think there's maybe a lack of awareness there, or lack of awareness of roles and what can be opened up for you. I think another thing which kind of springs to mind is around researchers and why is this happening? I think we can absolutely point things out and speculate, and there are quite obvious areas on why this happens. But I think it would be good to see some research into this area, why people are choosing different paths, and is it that we're, you know, we have all of these characteristics and qualities, such as, you know, females being creative, being caring, and so on, and then, you know, males being more technically focused. But actually, I think some research into this area would be quite good to see, and then we can, you know, obviously research can bring out a lot of areas of focus and you know, things we can improve on really along those pathways, and whether it be at school levels, promotion, awareness of roles. And you know, just thinking back to that scenario, Leah, that you've pointed out around the play, and you know, it's okay to do this, but it's okay for anybody to do this. It's part of growing, exploring, discovering, regardless of gender. I think it's really important. And you know, there's so many, you know, national promotions that we can do, and some fun things. If there needs to be more of a focus around, okay, we've focused, you know, on race and so on, but actually to have a more focus on gender and actually what is okay, rather than just pronouns and titles, but actually a more deeper dive into this area, I think would be great to see.
I think with that as well, like I know I came in a household that was very much like taking out the bins is a blue job, cooking in the kitchen is a pink job. And actually, as a son who's going through GCSEs at the moment and wants to do drama in college, he doesn't want to do drama of being out on stage. He wants to do the lighting and sound. But to be able to do drama, you have to be on stage. And it's so then limiting actually for him, who isn't interested in ever being the center of attention as an introverted autistic child. He wants to do the technical element. But he is then finding that difficult because drama is doing the drama, not doing the aspect of drama. And that's why then they have then a shortage of people being able to do lighting and sound in these theatres for TV shows, etc. And why then actually there is this gap that happens. And the same then happens really in women in tech, because actually women are interested in this. It may not be the same element as what the men are interested in, but actually it's just as important for us to be able to fill those gaps, to be able to move forward. So then actually we have more women in this workforce.
That's really interesting. There's a really interesting aspect, Kimberly, in relation to that, and that's like sort of, that's pretty crazy, isn't it? That sort of something like, you know, that your son's experiencing that in relation to that whole drama piece, and you wouldn't. I do understand to a certain extent that you have to do, when I say something, but you wouldn't think that they would have to be completely exposed to sort of like, no, you have to do all of this to get into that.
It was more when his teacher said, he doesn't like to do the drama aspect. I was like, no, but you've known this for 5 years.
It's like, yeah, what are we doing about it?
I think there are some really interesting kind of practical things that I've started to see around, and it's inclusion, isn't it? It's inclusive recruitment, and this is all part of the same conversation. And so where we've described that people don't necessarily know what jobs are, you know, really great job profiles and a day in the life of, and really kind of bringing home what that role actually is. Because often just a title and a job description, if you don't know, isn't enough to sway someone to be interested enough. And I think one of the other things that I've seen really positive outcomes of now is the providing interview questions before the interview. So, you know, you're not testing someone's memory recall. You're providing them with what we're going to ask you, and you're having a really detailed conversation. And that's had some really positive outcomes for, you know, all backgrounds, whether that's neurodivergence. I think, you know, talking about us earlier and kind of the female wanting to understand the question and give the perfect answer prep. It's not about that. It's just about having a proper detailed conversation at interview, isn't it? And I think where processes are evolving to be more inclusive, I think that should help, shouldn't it? But I think we just got to keep pushing that kind of progressive agenda rather than always thinking, well, this is the way we do it, so we've just got to stick to it.
Thanks for that, Leah. And have you been approached to do sort of like careers, sort of like things like, you know, going into schools or colleges, or sort of like in relation to that, and sort of like doing some promotion? Because I think we had from Sam Neville when she was on one of them, she was saying, you know, she does careers sort of days, and people think because she's got a uniform on and she's going in doing careers that she's talking to them about nursing, but she's not. She's going in and talking about digital health IT, and her role as a CNIO, and that whole pathway in relation to that, which I think is quite interesting, because again it's stereotyping, isn't it? Again, it's sort of like, oh, she's gone in a nursing uniform, she's going to be talking about nursing, like sort of, and that promoting that nursing career, and it's like, well, actually no, she's not, because we have different sort of like, you know, and I suppose it's trying to sort of, you know, get in at, and I know, Lee, you were saying about, and we hope, you know, it's getting in at ground roots, etc. But I think it's also as well, isn't it, making people aware and making know, yes, there are those opportunities out there, and yes, you can do it. And if we, you know, if we can sort of like, you know, go in and sort of like promote that at that level, I think that's a start, isn't it? I think in relation to that.
I've not done that, but I would definitely be up for doing that. You know, London schools or whatever. So if somebody's and is wanting, yeah, I'm not sure my school would fancy me back, actually, Dean. I was a bit of an I offered, they haven't taken me up on it, but if another one that doesn't know me during my younger years is interested, then they may fancy the idea.
You know what's quite interesting? It's got me thinking now. I'm going to speak to. I was speaking to Wendy Deering, and this is going off on a bit of a tangent, but she sort of like is really big on pushing the whole academic piece, because we were talking around, you know, just raising awareness in digital health within our workforce, our digital workforce, and we're all big advocates of, like, you know, a trained workforce and a workforce that is digitally mature, etc., and stuff like that. And you know, you don't hear a lot of talk around what are we doing to introduce this into the sort of like, you know, into, you know, courses, you know, pre-registration courses, sort of like whether it's, you know, nursing, AHPs, doctors, etc. There is nothing on the curriculum in relation to digital health. Yes, it is pushing its way into certain sort of like, you know, postgraduate sort of like courses and etc. and stuff like that, and degrees, but it needs to be mandated. And, you know, is there something, you know, we could do along those lines? It needs to come in, doesn't it? It needs to come in at early stages. It needs to come in education. Otherwise, we're too late, aren't we, down the line to sort of like, you know, we're almost, well, surprise, surprise, we're doing it reactively. NHS doesn't do reacts, do they? They're totally proactive, the NHS. And, you know, and it's exactly the same. And it's really interesting that all those concepts are the same. Kimberly, myself, Catherine, as clinical safety officers, you know, that whole clinical risk management process, proactive and reactive. But what do we do within the NHS? So it's, you know, there's a problem, fix it. Instead of that upfront sort of like work. And should we take those principles and try and apply that to do more proactive, positive, like sort of movement in relation to trying to make change?
I think definitely, Dean, I know we've spoken about this before, is being proactive is absolutely a big passion of mine, and looking to see, how can we prepare and tool up people, say for example, if we're looking at some of our roles is, digitally transforming organizations, and you're doing that with a workforce, but it's the workforce also we need to be thinking about who are coming through, whether it be, students and so on. That's a constant, isn't it? And actually getting people at, day one, and having a module within any source of a course, whether it be nursing, physio, AHP, and so on. They're our biggest workforces, and doctors that are going to be the end users of systems, is to have absolute real in-depth module around systems, clinical safety, and also I think it's important. It's something that we're looking at in my organization's digital literacy. Actually, I think it's an assumption that's made that people are competent to use their mobile phone to book a flight or to shop on Amazon, for example. But that's fine in the comfort of our own home. But I think when you put a system in front of somebody, it's a very different headspace that somebody is in, and you're expected to, document or do something or place an order for your patient using a system. That transfer of ability and competence using a device can change significantly, because people have a fear of it. But I think if we actually empower people through education, or as early as possible, and be proactive about doing that, we will absolutely have better outcomes and engagement with systems. And, part of that, I would love to see an emphasis on clinical safety and, an awareness of the role, and assuring that systems are safe, and if they have concerns, that they can report them, and they have the ability to do that through education.
Yeah, totally. And I think we all have a responsibility in relation to that. I think we all have a responsibility in relation to sort of like a lot of everything we've discussed on this panel. We are coming to a close, and I'd like to thank everybody for being part of the panel, and some really interesting discussions. Before you all go, I just want to put you on the spot for one last session. For those of you that have been on the podcast before, you will know that I ask you all just to give me what's your one takeaway from our discussions, that one message you can give to the audience. And I'll start with Rachel.
You saw those eyes go wide. I wasn't expecting to come up first, Dean. I guess the one bit that this has really made me reflect on is that I have a responsibility to help around getting the message out there to the younger crowd, which is pretty much everybody for me these days. But I'm referring to whether it is early teens and doing a bit of talking at schools about the opportunities, and I think making that quite targeted, for girls around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't be shy. You can do whatever you fancy, and doing a bit of storytelling around some of my experiences. So yeah, I'm up for it. Maybe Miles School will get in touch, Dean, after they hear this and say, "Oh, she's a reformed character. Let's get her back in." But anyway, back in the real world, maybe we can plug into some. So that's my takeaway.
Brilliant, Catherine.
I suppose my takeaway would be, I think we all want to do something. We all want to make a difference. Is for us as a community to stay connected after this. And you're doing great things through bringing us together. And I think it's a really great opportunity for us to continue to collaborate, learn from each other, and I think offer support out to people and say, look, if you need to talk about digital transformation, clinical safety, being an entrepreneur, so on, that I'm here. I have responsibility of do that little bit of storytelling, as you're saying, Rachel, and help reach out. And it's fun, isn't it? Because we enjoy it. It's our passion. It's what pushes us out of bed in the morning. And so I think definitely staying connected with each other, and building that network together, and nurturing that is really my takeaway for today.
Thanks, Catherine. Kimberly.
Yeah, so a bit like that of the CSR role, there's still a drum that needs to be banged. And actually in this, it's to support and uplift others and for people and ourselves to reach out to make sure that we are supporting each other in moving forward, because without that drum, we can't move forward.
Thanks, Kimberly. And Leah?
I guess just that progress isn't perfect and it doesn't have to be perfect. So if you've got an idea, if you want to do something, reach out and find someone that can help you, or just have a go. Like, have a go, be messy. You know, it's the only way we're gonna move forward in this arena. We can reach out and support and develop as much people as much as we can, but we need those people that have got those little ideas, little fires, to be brave and to come forward and to just have a go.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you ever so much for your time, guys. It's been really inspiring. It's been great. And I hope everyone that listens, there's lots of people out there that will get something out of this. And maybe it will get them thinking about, do you know what? I can do it, or I am going to do that. I was thinking about it, maybe not, but I am now. Absolutely fantastic. And yes, completely agree with everyone. Catherine, you've got me thinking about community and what we can do moving forward. I've got loads of ideas now in my head, and I'm going to be playing some of those out with some of you as we move forward. But let's crack on. And if anyone's got any resources, and this is for the audience out there as well, we will be creating a resource page on our website. But what I'll do is I'll try and get it out there so it's away from the website as well, so people can access it away from the DPM website as well. So if anyone, Rachel, Kimberly, Catherine and Leah, if you've got any really good resources, if you can ping them across to us, then we can make those, we can give people access to those so they can find those in relation to that. Thank you ever so much for everyone for this panel. We look forward to panel 3 for everyone watching as well, and speak to you all soon.
Thanks, Dean.
Brill. Thanks, Dean. Nice to see everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Care.